Welcome, everybody. I'm Brad Bush with Strategy for AI. I really appreciate you joining this webinar. This is a webinar that we have once a month to talk about topics for medium-sized service businesses. That's specifically my focus, but it's really applicable to all different types of businesses on how they can use AI in a human-centered way. Today is a really exciting day for me because we're going to talk about how you can begin working on your AI strategy and vision as a company leader. And that is really important to me because that is the first part of the book that I just published called AI Strategy for Mid-sized Service Businesses, which you can get. It's very similar to what we just talked about. So with that in mind, I'll share the screen and we'll get started. The goal is to make this be 30 minutes or less with Q&A included. So the presentation will be relatively short, but hopefully extremely appropriate. Okay, here we are with one giant canvas. I thought that was really a great metaphor for when you sit down with AI, or you have a blank page and it's always asking you for a question. But it's the same when you sit down and make a strategy. It's the same for a business leader when they're trying to figure out what the vision of the business is. And I think that really leads to thinking about how do we approach these problems. And I really want to talk more about how we approach these problems from a human-centered point of view. So that the paradox in leadership is that the ones that are winning with AI, and this is proven through several different studies now, are the ones that are asking the right question. And that question isn't, how can we reduce our cost with AI? Or even how can we increase our revenue with AI? The right question is, how can we free our people from the work that they hate to do so they can focus on the work that they love? And the reason for that is, as we do this, we will create passion, and that passion will lead to culture, and that culture will lead to the things that we really want, which is a successful business. In the interim, though, we can still measure those hard return on investments, which are reducing costs and increasing revenue. We need to do all of it at the same time. And the most effective projects and strategies for AI are ones that free the people from the work that they hate to do. So why do mid-sized companies win? And if you've been with me through all of these talks, you will have heard some of this. I think that mid-sized companies are in a very unique position in what I call the Goldilocks zone of AI implementations. Large enterprises are plagued by what I call the death of 1,000 pilots. They focus more on technology and less on people because they have to, because they're pushed to meet executives' view of just use AI. And I think that bogs down their IT teams and bogs down their business teams with unnecessary use of AI purely for a technological reason. Startups are fast and they lack data volume, structured processes, resources to truly take advantage of AI the way it needs to be taken advantage of, where mid-sized businesses have the perfect balance of the resources and the agility. So the natural advantages to those mid-sized businesses are decision speed, quality of your data, and that's something that you have to work on to get to. Cultural unity. When you get to these size businesses, 30 to 500 people, you still can have a single cultural identity compared to a large company. And I've been in many large companies where different departments will have their own cultural identity. And you have a focus on your resources that the CEO or a major C-level executive can drive a concentrated impact on high areas. And then finally, and this may be the most important, you have learning agility. You can pivot quickly when something isn't working, and you can drive that learning deeply through your team. Research shows that 74% of the advanced AI initiatives that meet their ROI expectations are following this type of human-centered framework. And if you go back and deeply read the flawed, and I will call it flawed, and you can go read writing on it. MIT, 95% of AI projects fail research. That the good parts of that research do talk about why the ones that succeed. And it does talk about this, that you have to take the human side, training, implementation, culture, all the things I talk about into effect so that you can make sure that AI moves from a scary thing that may eliminate jobs to an exciting thing that may help people implement their jobs in better ways. So this says many of the same things, but I'm going to go through it again. The problem is that you can't make it a cost cutting or an elimination process. You have to make it succeed on a human layer. And again, the evidence is there. So an accounting team moving from data reconciliation to financial strategy. These are what we want. We want to raise the teams up. We want to move customer service from routing questions to solving the hardest complex problems that our customers have. We want operations moving from tracking all the metrics and reporting those up to leadership to moving to optimizing the processes so that they can deliver better to the customer. So these are just some kind of the outcomes that you have when you move your people from resistors to advocates of AI. So this is somewhat the money chart, and I'm going to scroll it down just a little bit because this is the 8-element framework from the book of creating the human-centered AI success framework. And I'm going to go through each of these 8 elements in a little bit more detail in the next couple of pages. But what you can see is it's just like a business strategy framework and has some of the same similarities if you've been to business school and have looked at some of these things. But it's specifically targeted to AI and the AI implementation and AI readiness within a business. So let's go through the first 4. The first 4 elements create the foundation for the AI canvas. They tell the why and the what of what your AI strategy should accomplish. You can start with the human impact vision, and all of these are going to have a tie back to the human in some way or another. And I think that's the key to this human AI focus, is to continually, as you look at each of these parts of the AI strategy framework that you do, the AI strategy canvas, that you specifically look at the human in each of the boxes. So the vision is just like when you're setting the vision for the business, you need to set a vision for how AI will impact the vision, especially from a human perspective. How will we automate our manual accounting so that we can have a focus on our deep financial analysis and strategic planning, for example, for an accounting firm? And a business objective on number 2 would be, then how can you specifically meet those visions in your major business objectives? Now, they don't need to be down at the project level. So it could be something for that accounting firm, like we will reduce 50% of our manual invoice input by freeing 4 hours of work per week. Now, that's pretty specific. That may be better for a much smaller team, but you may bring those objectives a little bit higher than that. Data for human insight. This is one of the places where AI strains the most, is that if you don't have clean data, you have to work to get the data clean. And it's the same for all IT projects throughout all of time, is that AI will do the same thing, garbage in, garbage out, maybe even at a higher volume. So you have to make sure that you get your humans so that they can look at the data that AI generates and puts a layer on top of all of your data, creates charts, creates visuals, and so that the humans can then generate their insights out of that. And then finally, on the foundation area, you need to make sure that the technology that you pick completely integrates with the workflow and the way people are approaching their job. And this is the way you really need to look at technology, just not as a tool that can implement AI, but as a tool that will solve a person's problem using AI. And that's such a differentiation that I want to make sure leaders are thinking of today. The next 5 elements are all about how you go about doing the first 4 elements. So you've set your foundation, and now how are we going to go about that? The 5th element is the skills development strategy. We're trying to implement this with humans. 70% of our costs that we spend on AI should be with the humans. A majority of that cost should be with educating people. And I know it sounds old school and somewhat pedantic, but people are afraid of these tools. And the way to get through that fear is to show them how they work, show them how they're going to work strategically inside the business, show them how they're going to impact their daily job, and show them how we're going to make sure that it solves their problem and that it can move them then into um, new skills and new abilities. And we need to train them for those new abilities also. And so all of that training needs to be a huge portion of how you implement your AI strategy. Secondly, number 6, cultural transformation. You need to position AI as a career enhancement, not as a job threat. Celebrate the elimination of this drudgery, not the elimination of people. And I think this is a super important point. I've already said it multiple times, but I think this is the key to really getting your team on board and making sure that they understand where AI is heading inside of your business. And there will always be job eliminations. We know that as executives, but what we need to do is not blame AI for that, because the way to do this is to say we had inefficiencies in these areas. AI is helping us do better at that. And now you as a team can go put your focus on other areas to help us raise the entire business up. And I do feel that there will be eliminations of positions here and there, but we also can reskill and move our people around to do other things inside the business to help customers. Governance for human values. And I really truly believe that governance, as number 7 points out, will be really important. In the book, I go through governance in a really somewhat strict fashion because I think that governance is really important, and there's an entire chapter on it. And we'll have probably another one of these sessions just on governance and my views on governance. But governance is really important that you have 3 different constituents in the governance section, that you have someone from the business, someone from the technology, and someone from the actual lower level workers on that governance committee. And in fact, I suggest that you only have those 3 people and that those 3 people make the decisions so the decisions can be faster. You don't have 12 people. What you want to do there is prevent bias, prevent lack of privacy, make sure you have human oversight, and do everything that you're deciding, both from a tools, process, and people perspective of AI. And finally, and this is almost the most important, I've said that a few times, but this really is the most important. Success measurement. Measure a baseline, measure how you are getting after you've done AI, and then decide what the goals are between the two, and are you meeting those goals? And you should not just measure your productivity gains, your return on investment, but you need to continue to measure employee satisfaction, career development, and other human traits that will make sure that these human-centered AI projects that we're putting in are working the way you want them to work. This gets into a little bit more detail on where we go from here. And I'm not going to completely read the whole thing back, but once you have an AI strategy and an AI canvas done, what you want to do is decide on a few different models of things that you could do with AI. And I call those AI impact projects. Decide on a few AI impact projects, pick 3 to 5 in a few months, around 3 months at max. Build at least one of those so that you can create a flywheel with AI doing something that is helping the people in your business. In the next 9 months, scale that through expansion to the rest of your enterprise. Maybe you started with one department, maybe then you go into different parts of the organization. And finally, sustain that through competitive advantage. Build that back, not only through internal usage, but external usage with your product, with the way you interact with customers. But partly the bottom line on this is to start small, win big in the beginning, and scale that through multiple projects. This is one of the prior webinars that we did called the AI Whisperer, and I wanted to repeat a few things because I do think it's important for this strategy, is that you should identify people that are more effective at AI than others and make them champions inside of your business. These are some of the traits that you should look for: curiosity, conversational thinking, comfortable with ambiguity, They're persistently patient. It says patient persistence, but I like persistently patient better. Creative problem solving and a growth mindset. They have that Angela Duckworth point of view. Really, a lot of these things are leading towards that more malleable mindset that she proposes. What you need to do now is identify those employees that you feel are in this AI whisperer mindset, develop them, and then leverage them to accelerate your organization-wide deployment. Make them your champions. And this is really important that you have some people inside the business that are doing this for you. So your next step in the next 30 days, assess your position, build your own AI strategy canvas. This I'll show you in a second where you can get this PowerPoint presentation. Listen to your people, conduct employee sessions, make sure that you know where their routine task frustrations are. Identify your AI whisperers like we just talked, and then map your quick wins, which are I call the AI impact projects. Start with human empowerment, focus on freeing people, build advocates, not resistance, and think transformation, not just efficiency. So here's some questions. I'm going to maybe answer some of your questions ahead of time. How do we overcome employee resistance to AI? I think we've talked a little bit about that. Build your champions, do a lot of training, make sure they understand the strategy. What's a realistic timeline for seeing results? And I think that even though you're going to do a 30-day project and you can measure the results, then you should give all your projects at least 1 year in the field, because you can be short-sighted and not seeing the value. And it's not very much longer to run them another 90 months another 9 months after the 90 days have ended. How do we identify the right AI opportunities? We can talk about this in another webinar, but in the future, potentially. But the way I do it is that we do the old consultant methodology of dividing into two, so we get a quad graph of the things that are the highest impact at the lowest cost, both for the business as well as from a technology perspective. And that upper quadrant of highest impact with lowest cost are the ones that we then boil down into and try and figure out how do we make those into something that's the most valuable for the business. How do we talk about job displacement concerns? We've talked a bit about that already today, but I do think you should talk about that head on, that AI is scary for everyone, including the executives, because we're trying to figure out how we keep from being displaced by other companies that are using AI. And so we have to continue to evolve, but we're going to figure it out together, and we want everyone to work through it. And I think that has to be your answer. So you have to work through it with your employees and not work through it against them. And how much should we budget for AI transformation? And this is a hard thing to answer because it really depends on the business. But I've done projects for as little as a few $1,000s to projects up to tens of thousands of dollars. So it really depends on the business. What I'm happy to do, and that's the next, is that go through this with you. I do a free executive AI briefing for 30 minutes. Which includes 19-question readiness assessment up front. One of the things we can do is a half-day AI workshop to help you understand your business, and a 4-week implementation to get one of your AI workflows, AI impact projects done. You can visit strategy4.ai to figure any of that out. And if you like what you've heard today, it is the first couple of chapters of my new book that's out. It's 140 pages of AI strategy for mid-sized businesses. You can click on this link, or you can go to the site, and it's the very first thing that you'll see, and you can click on that. So when you have the ability to, you'll go to the site and you can click on resources in the future, but you'll also get that emailed to you if you came to this webinar in just a few hours, and it will have all these links. So with that, I will stop sharing, and we'll use the last 9 minutes for questions. And so hold on 1 second, and I will allow people to unmute themselves. Okay, everybody has the ability to ask questions. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Hey, Brad, it's Don. I don't know that I have a question as much as a couple of comments per se, and to the slides you presented. Going back to your mid-size company thing, I think there's another aspect of mid-size that might help address the job concern question, right? Many mid-sized companies are already these days really thin, right? So reminding people that at least the company I'm in traditionally or have been in for years have been very thin. So AI can actually, like you said, be a leverager or an enabler to get more done with a thin resource pool that already exists in many places. So I think that's one thing you can steer people to, assuming it's that sort of situation, right? So,
That is a great point, Don. And I do feel like this mid-sized service business group, especially service businesses, but all mid-sized businesses have that constraint. And
yeah.
we, as employees and even managers of those businesses or leaders of those businesses, have felt those constraints. And I know that AI can help us through that and be a leverager, like you said, for that. And so that's a great point and a point that I've made in the past, but I did just miss today. So thanks for helping me make that point. Are there
Okay,
other?
so I don't know, this might be a dumb question, but how I don't know if I'm thinking too small. I use AI almost every day just to ask, try to figure out the best strategy, things like that, and sometimes coding and stuff like that. But when I start digging into going, okay, so what's a project I could start up and doing, I end up realizing, oh, I just need to do some integration with another system or automation and use some recipes or scripts and stuff like that. And it's old school automation. It's not really AI anymore. And I keep pigeonholing myself into that. And then when I try to figure out like, oh, maybe we should do some customer, some like support type stuff. I talk to my Salesforce admin type groups, user groups and developer groups I'm in. Everybody I've talked to says we have never done anything customer facing. Nobody trusts it that much yet. We're only doing internal things. So what is a good first kind of project to start looking at to do something like that, to get it to dip your feet into the AI that's for the departments, internal departments?
I really do appreciate the question, John. It's a great question. And it's one of the harder questions. And I think it depends on every business because every business is different. And the constraints on the businesses are how mature are their processes, how skilled are their people, and how good is their data, right? It goes back to the old school things. And, sometimes just automating their existing process with an automation tool may be the right answer with no AI involved. Um, but AI is getting good at things that humans were able to do only because they're humans. And that is things like review. Let's just take an example one reviewing non-standard invoices to pull off who is the vendor, what's the vendor address, what is the amount, and when is it due. Okay, that's four things that an AI can take any type of invoice and look at it and pull those four things off. But that used to absolutely take a human, and you can't do that through a standard workflow. So what you need to do is look for things where you can now automate it through a something that feels semi-human but is more routine because AI can do something that is generative and interesting that couldn't be done before. Does that help answer the question?
Hey, John, I was going to say, I know you and I are from the same company.
Right.
Haven't talked recently, but
Yeah.
the two most successful projects we've had to date are ones that business people came to us where they were saying, look, I'm trying to do something either faster or I'm trying to do something that has in the past taken me, a lot of tedium to do. And we know the data is there. And I'm thinking of, look, you've got the documentation team that's trying to get things done in a style of the documentation person who's no longer here, right? She left and we're trying to get that done. So they wanted to leverage the style of our existing documents and they've met with some success in that. They tried a couple of tools. One was better than the other. And then the second one was Brian in the Atlanta office. He had a very specific set of use cases he wanted to do where to generate product comparison sheets. So he went and sourced all our competitors' data sheets and our data sheets and put them into one spot and then started, working to craft the things that he wants with the certain parameters, depending on what sales opportunity or what job or what problem they're trying to solve. And he's met with some pretty good success on that. Again, it took some iterations, but it's been more the business bubbling up things rather than me or someone else trying to say, oh, this is where I think AI is going to make a difference. People tend to know where they want to make a difference with something that's been trivial, tedious, time consuming, requires hiring another person to get done maybe. So you're not necessarily eliminating a job, but you're not getting a temporary help to do something that you can push off on the AI tool to help you with. So anyway, just thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, I think in that vein, I'm using it all the time to do stuff where I've
Yeah.
got one-off stuff,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to think of what's a low-hanging fruit of something
Yeah.
that we would
And
actually turn
I
on
do-
for the company-wide or
Yeah.
department-wide. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm struggling with.
And
And we
I
could
do think,
talk about
yeah,
that, Don,
yeah.
too.
And I do think one-off things are not to be discounted. And one thing that is really important, and both of Don's examples brought this up, is that context is the key. When you're thinking about these AI workflows that you can build or AI impact projects, even if it's not a workflow, is that you have to have that context there. It can come in data, it can come in the form of documents. But both Don's examples were really keen. One was really something where the person was trying to set it up on a day-to-day basis to replace something that wasn't there anymore. But the other one was more one of a database, for lack of a better term, a set of contexts that you could feed in, which were documents, that then you could ask on a one-off basis questions to it. So setting up these agents, sometimes you don't have to think of them as a flow through that happens every day to send data from here to there. You can think of them as something that you now have the ability to treat as a work companion that you can now ask a different set of questions to that you couldn't ask before. And that's more on the product side, that's more of what it is. So
Okay.
that may be another way of thinking about it that helps you.
All right.
We're hitting the end of the hour, and I say I like to keep them to 30 minutes, but I will take as many questions as you guys want to ask. And anybody that needs to drop off is welcome to drop off.